I don't want the upper edge of the drawing to be real dark because that part is in the light. So I'm going to just put a little line here. I could even go up a little higher. That line is the top part of my rock, the highest part of my rock, and it's about a third. Here's my paper, and it's about a third of the way over. Okay. So the highest part of my rock, and then it angles down, and look at which direction it angles down, and it's not exactly straight, and then it kind of curves, and then angles in. There's a dip in, and then an angle down. So I've just done this outside edge. Then I'm going to look here and go, okay, it's about this long, and then takes a slight turn out, and then it bends down. There's a little crevice thing here. Then it comes out a little bit more, and there's another ledge. Then it comes down from there. There's another ledge that kind of comes up. It comes out, down, and at an angle, slight angle this way, similar to the angle up here. Here. So I'll stop, but that's how I look at the overall shape to start with. Yeah, go do one little part at a time, and that if they come from one point to the next, what does it do? What direction does it go? And this isn't exactly straight in here, but I couldn't really see what was happening because it's dark in there. I'll make that a little darker. But that's my outside shape. The more you draw freehand, the more it'll come. But I'm gonna look, and mine's not exactly accurate either. But I'm looking at this triangular shape here, and I'm gonna go ahead and kind of sketch that in. And then it needs to make it a little bit bigger, because it's going to create a little crevice here that I see, and whoop, and there's a big dent right here in the rock, and then it comes back toward the corner here. See, I didn't look at it this up close when I painted it the first time. Okay, but the main thing I want you to see is where the dark, these sides right here, the top, this upper triangle, which I need to make bigger, this upper triangle, there's another dent in through here. I'm not gonna worry about that. But see this plane, this upper plane right here, the top plane, and this triangle are going to be most of your lightest lights. Okay, so what we can do, I'm going to do this one slightly different. Oh, I was filming the whole way. I'll have a bunch to delete off that one. Okay, we're going to do this one slightly different. So just watch, and I'll show you. So because I'm going to start it kind of like a watercolor. Okay, if I'm doing a watercolor, my first coat is one of the lightest colors that I see. So I went to my palette. There is a watery light blue that has a little bit of brown in it, so it's not a pure blue. And some of these colors are going to be some of the lightest tones. So all I'm going to do right now, is I'm going to lay in, see, very, very, very watery, very, very watery, the whole thing. I'm going to pick.
You're doing the stroke along with how you have it block.
Some of it, yeah. I mean, like if it's flat, but I want this watery. I want this to be a base coat. If I know it's darker, I'll put a little bit more brown tones in it. But I want watery blue-gray. Okay? Do that. I'm going to add a little more dark toward the bottom. But you're not going to do anything else till that's dry. So lay it in, watery, watery, watery. And I used a flat brush so I could just lay it in kind of the streaks. Because I think if you embrace the watercolory effect of the gouache to get a base coat, so that you're paying attention. I am sort of paying attention to lights and darks, but I'm letting some of the paint move and blend together on its own that creates some beauty in it. And this by no means is the top coat. This was burnt sienna and ultramarine blue with more water, more water, more water, and a touch more blue. So it's when you can get, because of the versatility that I can get with this, if I have more blue in the original mixture, and then add water and water and water, whoops, and water, then this will, you know, these are more brown, these are more blue, but that's how I can do so much with just those two colors. I love those two colors. Mine with the hair dryer because I want to know that it's dry. What I want to do now is I'm going to take some of that same color, but I'm going to look to see, all right, obviously I don't have a definite separation of light and dark. I have a beginning of that, but it's not enough because this front side of your rock, see how this is slightly darker than this, or it's warmer anyway, but I want it much darker because I want a definite shift of what's in the light. So I'm going to go to my palette. I'm just picking up some of that I just mixed. There's not much on there. Let me put a little bit more. Sorry, you can't even see what I'm doing. Well, it's kind of glary anyway. All right, so I have burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. It is not drippy wet, but it's dark. So I'm going to start down here, and I'm going to see, you know, okay, it's flowing pretty good, so that's all right, but I don't want it to be solid. So I'm barely touching the paper. Okay, see how I'm laying the brush down, and just look at this. I mean, it's just barely touching. So I'm going to look at the direction that I can add some of the darks in. I might want it a little bluer. And there's a little bit up here, and there's a little darkness in here. Look at the top edge. I want the top edge where that rock changes direction. And then I see direction. I see how I still want some of the underneath color to show through. You see how I'm seeing that? It's kind of dry brush. Dry brush. Okay, if it's not moving at all, then reload your brush. But I'm trying, okay, now I want this end a little bluer. So I'm going to put a little more blue in my mixture. And it shifted it a little darker. That's okay. But what I want to do right now is just kind of establish where some of the darks are. Up here, there's a little line. There's that front edge, a little bitty ridge there. It's a little dark. Well, I missed that part in there. And there's some really dark right in here. There's a little crevice. I'm going to mix a mixture of that real dark. I want that real dark. That's very dark. There's a little crack along there. Now that I have the really dark on my brush, I'm just going to lay in a line for the underneath shadow. This is very dry right now. Very dry. It's dragging really bad. And I'm working on Arch's paper right now. So now that I just put that dark in, all I'm doing is going back. I wet my brush. I'm just wetting. See, I thought it was bluer than that. I'm just wetting what I just put in. I want my shadow bluer, so I'm going to add some blue to that. I want my shadow to have soft edges, so I'm just extending that a little bit with clean water. Still don't like how brown that, ooh, added way too much blue there. All right, I'm just gonna leave it alone and let that shadow do its thing. While I have some blue on my brush, I am gonna drag a little bit up on this side because there was a little bit more blue mixed in with the brown. And now I'm gonna stop and let y'all lay in your darks. When I look back at this, this should be this should be dry. Mine, you know, put the back of your hand on it. If it feels cool to the touch, it's probably still damp. But this should be dry. So what I want to look at is, y'all see what I'm right here. I see some warmth in this rock, and then there's some light blue. I want to take. It's like okay, I'll show you what I'm. It's like this. This is a mixture of the burnt sienna that had a little bit of blue in it, because see, true burnt sienna is this color. See how orange it is? When I add blue to it, it tones it down. So that's way too orange. I don't want it that orange. So I add a little bit of ultramarine to it, and you can dull it down. You can make it really dark or
You want it on
brown.
the brown side?
I want it a little toward the orange side, but not that orange. All right, so what I'm going to do is I want to add some warmth, watery warmth, and this might not be watery enough, and it's going to be, you're going to go, ah! It's going to be too much, but I'm going to just show you something. It's like, okay, if I lay this in, see, that's too dark right now, but I want some warmth in this. So now I'm going to come back and wet it. If it's very thick, it's going to get really dark. I don't want it really dark. Now I'm going to dab it up, and it sometimes can create different texture. If you have a paper towel, sometimes your paper towel can give a little texture. But I wanted to have some of the warmth that was in this side of this rock also in the upper part. Now I'm going to come back over that with some blue. So it's not going to stay that warm. I wanted some of this brown that was over here up there. But while I have some of this mixed, I'm going to come back. See some of this side? See how light some of this is in through here? Right here, y'all see that? Okay, and look at my picture. When I look at this and I look at this, all of this does not read like it's in the shade. So I'm just going to come back and dragging my brush lightly across, or maybe slightly at an angle at some time. I'm going to push back all the light that I see down here. I'm going to make it darker. So I'm separating my light from my shadow. So any part that is in the shadow, go ahead and knock out any white that you have left. It looks really solid right now. We're going to add some reflected light in a minute. All right, so what we're going to do is add a little bit of reflected light in the darks. I'm going to add some blue.
Dark blue?
It's going to be a fairly dark blue. That might be too light. What I wanted, you look in your picture and you'll see where there's some parts of the rock that are bluer than others. And let me see if I put it, I'm just going to test it. Okay, that's probably too opaque. I'm just going to water that down. All right, I'm just going to take a little bit of that and drag a little bit of blue. It might be, okay, this is just making it darker. I want a little lighter than that. There we go. That's probably going to be too light, but I'm going to let it sink in.
Okay, got it.
You see what I'm talking about?
Yep.
It's watery. It's pale blue. And while I have this pale blue, I'm going to come up here. Oops, I want to make more, I'm going to add more white to it. And I'm going to drag it across the top of the rocks. Pale blue. Try to drag it in the direction that you see the rock, and it's kind of a dry brush, so you still should see some of the rock through it. So you start with the blue in the watery mix on the side that's dark. Add water to it, white to it, and then drag it at the top.
Now the top of the rock, is that the watery mix? Sorry.
No, it's more dry, but it's got more white in it.
Okay.
You want it to be draggable,
Okay.
but to where it does leave some texture. And so I'm just looking to see where I see a little. I'm like this side bit right here that's a little lip. That's kind of bluey.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so add a little bit of blue to yours, and then let that dry.
Maybe think of Elvis's Blue Christmas.
I'm so blue.
Anybody see the pictures today where Trump said that people think he looks like Elvis?
Oh, you?
What?
How
They
could
have
he
a
think
picture,
that?
They cut half of the face of Trump and half the face of Elvis, and Trump had said, all my life people would tell me that I look like Elvis. That just entertains me.
Okay, I'm going to get rid of the light. Do you see here, along here, where there's light that there really isn't?
Right.
Okay, so I'm just gonna pick up a darker tone. No, never mind. I'm just gonna pick up a wet brush to start with. I'm gonna drag some of what's there. Yep, it is not letting me drag.
Nope.
Boy, you're right.
Arches it just sticks.
It does not
That's
move.
why on that other rock, I was like, there is no way. I cannot.
Okay, this is
possibly
Arches
get this to work.
paper, and it does not want it.
It doesn't want to cooperate at all.
You can lift it, but it doesn't want to slide it.
It won't slide it, and it really won't come off well.
That's interesting. What I'm doing is I'm using a watery mix of a bluish gray, and I'm coming where, see, like where this, okay, like this crevice right here. Here's a crevice. Okay, there's a crevice. Look and see what side the light is on. That crevice, the light, the hard edge is at the bottom of the crevice. You see what I'm talking about? So I blur up
Okay, point to the crevice here.
this crevice right here.
Okay.
All right, so that is a hard edge along here, and then it blurs up
Okay.
and then over. So look for how the light bends. I went a little too far on mine. That's a little too, see how wide that got? I did the same width all the way across, and it gets more like a triangle. It gets skinnier on this side. So I'm just going to come back with a lighter tone and cover that. All right, I'm getting a dry mix off my palette of a very light color. I'm going to drag that or dab that very light color where my lights are. Ooh, might need to mix up some more. It's not moving.
And what are you using for your very light color?
Right now it's a very pale yellowy brown. I probably want it bluer than that. Yeah, let me add a little bit of the cerulean blue to it. Okay, can you see how almost pale blue-green, maybe? It's a grayish, dull, but it's lighter. I want you to see the lightest parts on this rock. It's kind of wet, and I'm just laying in, not solid, but kind of in a speckled manner. See, I'm barely touching. Barely touching. Oh, I didn't put the crease back here. I didn't put that in yet. Well, it can be. It does, I mean, what I'm trying to imitate is the sky falling on it. Now, the picture itself is probably bluer than mine. I went more, probably a little greener than. The main thing is I want it mottled. I don't want it all smooth and the same. There's a little bit of that color in here, and I need to make that crevice a lot darker because it's dented in. But I'm looking at my picture on the screen, and it's kind of helping me see where to add the light. And I can lightly drag. Whoop, that might be a little too heavy. I'm adding a little more reflected light here. Just very lightly dry brush a little bit of this on that side. I think maybe no more. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I want to get, this is one of my favorite little brushes. It's like a script brush. Well, it is a script brush. It's silver black velvet script. But it is a watercolor brush that will hold quite a bit of paint because of the long bristles. But I will also...
This kit, it would be a number 1 or 2.
Maybe, probably. Yeah, but see, mine's gonna just, yeah, it's something that I can get a tiny line with that will hold some color. So if y'all will just watch for a second, I'll show you what I'm gonna do. I'll zoom in on the camera so you can see a little better. Whoops, wrong camera. Forget I'm working 2 cameras. Okay, all right. So I see all in my phone, my picture on my camera. I'm seeing all these little lines and crevices, and then there's some speckles. I'm going to speckle it. I can speckle it later, but I'm going to go again with that burnt sienna and that ultramarine blue, but I'm making well, you can hardly see it off camera here. See how dark that is? It looks really dark. It's probably similar to my shadow. And if you need to test your line, can you see how nice tiny line that? I mean, that's a tiny line, but see how dark it is. I'm gonna not worry about how thick. I want a very light touch, but I'm gonna come back later and soften the line. So right now I'm just laying in some lines. So that I'm gonna lay in the line here. There's a little jag here. This should have been a little darker anyway. And this was dark in here. It's a little crevice. The line comes up. Some of the line will be solid. Some of it, you just let it break up. And there's a teeny little line that kind of follows the edge of the rock around the corner. And you can follow that line around. Some that are vertical. I'm just dragging it. Some of it's like this. I just pressed my brush a little bit more and it feathered out a little bit, kind of a dry brush effect. Up here, I want it to be a little darker right there. I'm just looking for where's some dark that I see. All right, my dark here is a little further down than the actual picture. The actual picture is a little further up, so I'm not going to worry about that. But I just do want to create some crevices, kind of following the shape of the rock and where it bends and cracks. Can you see that? Can you see what I'm doing? And like here, I come off and bend and it goes down. But I did all of that with one load of the brush because this was a watercolor brush. Now, I'm going to rinse it out. It's water only, and it might be wet enough to blur out, to soften a little bit. Yeah, it is. Okay, but I have a water droplet on the bottom of my brush. I want to avoid that. You see the water droplet? Mm-hmm. You don't want those falling off into your paint because that can really screw it up a bit. So again, I'm just going to look at what I just did, and if I can soften it with the brush that I just used, and just blur it a little bit. I don't need to soften every bit of it. I can leave parts of it a little hard line. This I needed to, that was too heavy. Ooh, got a little too much water there. I'll just let it dry up. But again, I'm just creating a little variation in the surface by adding those directional lines. I'm going to add a little bit more down the side, some of it a little thicker. This is watery right now. And when it's watery, what's it going to do? And what is it going to do to what's below it? It's going to sink in. So it's watery, and look what I'm doing. I'm coming down where the bottom is, and I'm dragging up just a little bit. But I'm making sure that the very bottom of this rock is darker than any other part. So I'm just reestablishing that dark, but dragging some of the lines up just to create some variation. When you can get it really little, really tiny, and if you want to try this brush, I'll let you try it just so if you know what I'm talking about. And then I can come in, because I have a teeny little brush, I can come in and start putting little speckles every now and then, because there's speckles all over this rock. There's some on the side. Some of them are bigger. And that's just where, do you see my hand? It's just like, can y'all see my hand? Mm-hmm. It's like this. It's like I got a quiver in it. And I'm just bouncing around, creating little bitty dots. And then you can do the same thing with lighter colors. So I'm going to pick up a whiter tone, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to only add this whiter tone to where the light is. Okay, again, look how bright this is right now. You see how bright? That's like, oh, Kari, you're going to ruin it. Well, it's watery, so what is it going to do? It's going to sink in. It's going to dry darker. So this is how you can get some variation, is just know that when you put something light on that's watery, it's going to dry darker. but it's going to help you with your texture. And there's a little bit of light in through here. Look at the white now,
It looks pretty.
but it's not anything like it was when you first put it in there. And that was one thing that really frustrated me at first when I was painting with gouache is I would think I was putting in some white clouds, and then I'd look back and go, well, where'd they go? And now if you want it to remain white, what do you have to do?
Put more on
It has to be thicker. Okay, see, like this is very thick. If I put this on here, that's not going anywhere because it's not going to sink down in because it's thick. So if you want some light highlights, you can put that in there. You've got to be dry underneath. I don't know if I like that or not, but I think that's too light. But hey, I can hit it a little bit, and what happens? It gets wet. When it's wet, what happens? Then it starts melding down or absorbing into what's below. So I'm going to leave it alone. So many times if I don't leave it alone, and sometimes when I come back, if I've left it alone, it's like, oh, I like it now, when I might not have before. I'm going to add a little bit of reflected light in there. Okay.